Welcome to Meanwhile at the Museum, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes with the people, stories, and shenanigans that make Cincinnati Museum Center what it is. I'm Cody Hefner, and I'm joined today, as always, by Magic Mitch, who is our audio engineer, our podcast producer.
Yeah,
yes.
producer.
We've done this a dozen times, and I can't get it down.
You'll get it.
Okay. But also joining us in the Beat Laboratory is Dr. Glenn Storrs, our Curator of Vertebrate Paleontology, Assistant Vice President of Science Collections.
Science and Research.
Science and Research.
Yeah.
Okay. For the layperson, paleontologist.
Absolutely.
Is that the title you prefer most?
I usually tell people I'm the dinosaur guy.
The dino guy.
That seems to get them. Yeah.
Do you have the coolest title in the museum? Do you have the coolest job?
I have the coolest job, but the title maybe is not so much.
I mean, Mitch and I grew up as dinosaur kids. Mitch much more than me. We should let you do this interview.
Yeah, I grew up, wanted your job. Eventually ended up in this one, but closer than I thought I might end up in terms of there's dinosaurs in the building where I work. So
There's still time. You play your cards
still
right.
time. So were you a dinosaur kid?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe not so much as a lot of people. A lot of paleontologists start out as dinosaur kids and they just grow up to be them. I kind of moved out of it for a little while. Got interested in other stuff. Baseball, girls, that kind of stuff. But what
You went from paleontologist to just So as a kid, you thought, man, maybe one day I'll be a paleontologist. And you said, no. Maybe I'll be a baseball player. And then there was a brief period where you said, no. Glenn Storrs, ladies' man, is the path for me. But then you came back to dinosaurs?
Well, I decided I could do two of those things. Baseball never worked out. But, yeah. So, yeah, when I was a kid, my father, I was really very lucky because my father was in the publishing business, brought home books, all kinds of books all the time. And I remember one of the first ones he brought back was a book on prehistoric reptiles, dinosaurs and other prehistoric reptiles, a book that I still have in my office here at the museum.
Do you really?
Yes. And I later got the artist in that book to sign it for me when I met him later.
I was going to ask, in your career, you must have met a lot of other incredible people. And so you got at least the artist to sign it.
Yeah, I met all sorts of people. I don't want to
go. We'll get into that.
Right.
We'll name drop in a bit.
All right. Yeah, so I thought, oh, this is really cool. And then, there was a thing in the day called libraries, school libraries. You used to have to read books to learn stuff. So
Is that what they keep in those, books? Or
I believe they still do. They certainly did then. And so I would go and I'd get some of these books. I got Roy Chapman Andrews is a famous explorer looking for dinosaurs in the Gobi Desert. Read his books, that sort of stuff. So I was really interested in that. And then friends and myself and my siblings would go out looking for fossils as kids. Now, I'm sure in Cincinnati, it's easy to find fossils. In the mid-Hudson Valley of New York, where I grew up, I didn't realize at the time when I was a kid that I was living on metamorphic terrain. So metamorphic rocks do not preserve fossils, typically. Didn't know that. We did nevertheless find a few. So glacial rocks that had been moved south by the glaciers from erratics occasionally would have fossils in them. Anyway, so I was doing that. And then, as I said, sort of teen years intervene and stuff. But when it came time to go to college, I said, well, what do I really want to do with my life? And I looked at my father. His in publishing was great, but it was also the business world. I said, oh, boy, that looks rough. I want to go into academia where there's less politics.
Of course, yeah. I would go into academia where jobs are easy to find. And
you're a naive kid. You can think you can do anything. Anyway, that's when I decided, well, yeah, paleontology looks great. I wasn't focused on dinosaurs at the time. I just thought, oh, fossils, that's cool. Did a lot of stuff as an undergraduate. Came time to go to graduate school. Then they ask you, oh, well, what kind of paleontology are you interested in? Well, maybe vertebrate paleontology. That sounds cool. Bones, teeth, that sort of thing. Well, apply to a specific place. What kind of vertebrate paleontology? Maybe reptiles. It sort of grew from there, developed from there.
I was going to say, is vertebrate paleontology that's still too broad? You have to narrow down from there, right?
Yeah.
And this is my ignorance showing, but why? I mean, are there similar principles when you're talking Ice Age mammals versus Cretaceous lizards, or what's the specification that you get into?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain commonalities, of course, across the field. You have to be, anatomy, and you have to know things about preservation. Paleontology is maybe unique in that you really need to know a lot about the biological sciences as well as the earth sciences, geology and such. But you alluded to earlier, jobs are not so easy to get, particularly in paleontology. Everybody seems to want to study dinosaurs, but I'm one of the lucky few who's had that opportunity. And in order to get a job, you need to differentiate yourself from other people. So you have to do a PhD typically, and in order to do that, you have to specialize in something that either nobody else is doing or that you can do better than somebody else, and take it from there. So by necessity, there's a fair degree of specialization. However, having said that, you get to a museum, you got to broaden out again because there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Well, in a museum like ours, sometimes the location sort of dictates what your specialty is, right? I mean, you came to the museum center with a specialty, and then you realize we're just a couple miles from Big Bone Lick, which has incredible Pleistocene megafauna, the Ordovician period here. So you're talking about invertebrates, you're talking about, deeper prehistory. Do your specialties start to define themselves in place?
Yeah, very much so, particularly at a museum. Now, if you go, I didn't know what I was going to end up with as a job. If I even got one, was I going to be at a college, university? Would I be at a museum? I always loved museums. And frankly, really happy that I ended up with a museum because it gives you the opportunity to do so many different things. If you're at a university, you pretty much stick with what you started with, and you hammer that subject. But at a museum, there are a lot of other opportunities that come along. As you say, Big Bone Lick, right down the road. It's the birthplace of vertebrate paleontology, certainly in the Western Hemisphere. So I've done some stuff on the history of science related to that and Pleistocene mammals. I've had to broaden out and learn things about Paleozoic vertebrates, fish, and stem tetrapods, done some research work on those. Museums give you a lot of opportunities to kind of stretch yourself.
Are you surprised they said Pleistocene and not Ice Age?
Cody, you're a well-educated gentleman. I'm not surprised in the least.
He doesn't know how stressed I was pulling that. I was like, I know what it is. I got to find it real quick.
Well, you pronounced it okay, so that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your dissertation? What was your specialty in college?
Yeah, I worked on marine reptiles, particularly a group known as sauropterygians.
You graduated from Yale, right?
That's my PhD is from Yale.
Bulldogs or Yale Bulldogs?
Yale Bulldogs or Eli's. Yeah.
What's an Eli? That comes up in crossword puzzles.
Really?
Like, yes, and I'm like, what's a 3-letter word for Yale's mascot? And it always says Eli. What is that?
Eli is short for Elihu. So Elihu Yale was a Welsh businessman who provided the first donation of books and maybe, I think, some money to the university, and they named it after him.
So does your mascot look like a bulldog, or does it look basically the Quaker Oats guy?
No, there's a bulldog, Handsome Dan. But Yaleys are known as E.
Is there a real bulldog, like a live bulldog?
Yeah,
Georgia has a real bulldog.
Yale's got a real bulldog. I think they're on their 14th Handsome Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, I think something like that. But yeah, so Yale for PhD, but I did my undergraduate work at Syracuse.
Okay. Geology
and biology.
Just a big old orange. Right?
Big old orange. Still part of Orange Nation. Following them religiously, but not always doing as well as one would hope. And a master's degree at University of Texas in Austin.
Wow, you're all over the place.
Yeah. Well, before I came here, I was in England. I was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Bristol.
Yeah, I was going to say, so before we jump off your dissertation, the next question is going to be your journey that brings you here to Cincinnati Museum Center, but walk us through your dissertation a little bit. You said that you want to stand out. You have to do something, think of something that other people aren't. What made your dissertation stand out? What did you argue in it?
Yeah, so sauropterygian reptiles are the things that include plesiosaurs, which are, long-necked.
It's the Loch Ness Monster.
Well,
supposedly.
Yeah. That's how people often describe them, I guess. Although it's...
Is this the portion where Mitch takes over?
Should I say... Should I be diplomatic and say it's extremely unlikely that there is a plesiosaur in Loch Ness? But anyway,
wait, what's the diplomacy in that? Is Scotland going to be upset?
As opposed to straight up, no, not a chance.
We the cryptozoologists.
You always hope leave open the possibility.
we are very popular with the cryptozoologists, so thanks for not ruffling that fan base.
Yeah, well. I never want to offend anyone, as you know, Cody. So, our close interaction.
Well, that's because I'm not anyone. I'm Cody. That's why you offend me.
So, so there are other sauropterygians that are more plesiomorphic, more primitive. I've got my air quotes going there. So, essentially ancestral and early cousins to later groups like the plesiosaurs. So, one group's called nothosaurs. That's probably paraphyletic. You're not interested in that. So maybe not a natural group. But I worked on a particular taxon or species from Wyoming that was very poorly known, had been described in 1944, and tried to determine its exact anatomy, looked at the environment of deposition, the Alcova limestone Middle Triassic that it was found in. It was very unique. Looked at that, and tried to slot that animal into the evolutionary history of that group, Sauropterygia. More than you want to know.
How do you do your research? Are you doing your research in the field, or are you visiting different locations to see these bones, or is it book and article based?
Well, in this case, there was really only one paper that had been published, peer-reviewed paper on this, and there was really only one specimen. It was a pretty good specimen, the holotype, the name-bearing specimen. So I went and studied that. Came from Wyoming, was at the University of Michigan. Borrowed that. That's one of the things that museums and universities do. They lend specimens to other qualified researchers through their institution for research, exhibit work, that kind of thing. Did a lot of work on that specimen, but also spent a couple of seasons out west looking for more material, and was very fortunate enough to be able to find some. And that is now at the Yale Peabody Museum. Subsequently, we actually collected a little bit more here for Cincinnati, some bits and pieces on subsequent trips. Yeah, it's a thing called Corasaurus alcovensis.
So if there's only like one example of this thing, you just pretty much just the holotype, how do you go find more of it?
Yeah, that was looked at incredulously too by my supervisor.
I was going to say there's only one other paper, so you could, there's not a lot of evidence to dispute you, so you could.
The original description was good, but it could use updating, and we really needed new material to get the full picture of the anatomy of this animal. So it's just one of those things. Again, the naivete of youth. Oh, I'll go out and find some more, and we did. So.
As a scientist, can you ever really fail your dissertation? I mean, if you wrote the second paper on it, and if someone comes along a handful of years later and they say, actually, parts of this are incorrect, you didn't fail, you just progressed science, right?
That's exactly how science works. Yeah, you build on the shoulders of people before you, you test their ideas and observations, and you maybe falsify what their claims are, with new evidence. So that's not an issue. That's certainly what happens.
So you successfully defend your dissertation. You are now Dr. Glenn Storrs. What happens next?
Well, then you have to find gainful employment. And I must say, paleontology, I don't know, it may have maybe next to professional baseball players, as many people, a huge number of people who want to be them, and very, very few jobs available at any one time. So from there, I ended up working at the Peabody Museum at Yale for, I think that was 4 years, on soft money, that is grant money that we got, doing a lot of cataloging work, continuing some of my research, getting my dissertation published through the Peabody. And from there, fortunate enough to get a postdoctoral position at the University of Bristol. And that was funded by the Leverhulme Trust. And I went over there and spent 4 years at Bristol working on the quality of the fossil record with Professor Michael Benton, very, very big name, and also plesiosaur distributions, and finding more fossils in England of different things and starting to work on some of those. And, yeah.
And then from Bristol to
Cincinnati. Yeah.
So when did you join the Museum Center?
January 5th, 1995. So we're coming up on 30 years.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. It's amazing that people do remember their first day. They don't just remember the year. They remember their first day. And I wonder if that's... How does that stick in your mind?
Probably because it was January 1st and I drove through an enormous snowstorm to get here from New York. I don't know, I just remember it. But 30 years is another thing that sticks into my mind because there are only a few of us here that have been around that long.
It's fun. Mitch has had... I think you've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people who've been with the Museum Center for decades and the different videos and interviews that you've done with people. And that's another really cool thing about the podcast as well, is talking to people like you, like Dave Might, who's been here for, how long has Dave Might been? Dave Might
Longer than I.
Is here since, I think, right?
Yeah. I mean, James Burns has said he's been here.
He's almost 30.
So you're right. There's not a lot of people have been here so long.
But you know who are here? People in exhibits and people in the curatorial side of things. People are, just passionate about this job. Not that other people are not. But if you want to be a paleontologist, there are not that many places you can go. It's not like I could move across town, really, and, unless I went up to UC or something. But, I don't know, people just find their niche and they work on it and they make the place better over the years.
So people who visit the museum today can visit our amazing Dinosaur Hall, which is just fabulous, one of my favorite spots in the museum. But what was our dinosaur collections or exhibits or programs like here when you started?
Yeah, very different. So you mentioned Ordovician, invertebrate fossils, plenty of those. They're everywhere. Pick them up when you go outside. Ice Age were Pleistocene fossils. We got that. And that's what our collection was big in. We also had a lot of mid-continental Paleozoic stuff like fish and things. I think we only had 6 dinosaur bones in the whole collection because there are no dinosaurs to be found in Ohio, with the exception of my favorite, the cardinal, right? So I see him every day outside my window. Birds are living dinosaurs, as we know. And we have, it's now on exhibit in the Ice Age gallery, we have an Ice Age duck from Lachlan. So that was the extent of our dinosaur collection, really. But, people come to a museum and they expect to see dinosaurs. It's like going to the zoo. You expect to see lions and tigers, even though they may not be roaming the streets around you.
Right.
So I determined I was going to go out and try to collect some material and kind of build the program a little bit. And now we have not just 6 bones, we have 6 giant skeletons on exhibit and thousands of bones in the collection. And it's not all my doing. Once that program got rolling, we ended up with a lot of collaborators who use our institution as a repository. So Marietta College did a lot of work, and NKU, Northern Kentucky University. Hope College up in Michigan, a variety of people. Now we have this great partnership with Elevation Science. So the dinosaur program's definitely grown.
In Elevation Science, we had Katie Hunt on a few episodes back and talked about some of the work she's doing in the Paleo Lab. You mentioned repository. What does that mean?
Right. So we mentioned the progress of science and dissertations and publications. Well, all that means nothing if your original data isn't subject to repeatability and testing. So if you describe a new fossil, say a new species, or whatever you say about it, it's kind of my word against yours until, someone has a chance to go and look at that specimen and say, no, you're full of, that was not what this is, or you're wrong here, or you're absolutely right, whatever it may be. So you have to keep those specimens preserved for posterity, in perpetuity, as we like to say in the museum world. You just can't publish on a specimen that is not in a public repository available for research. So that's what we are. We are a repository where people reposit or deposit specimens that they've worked on. And we have scientists from around the region and even farther afield sending their material here because they know we will preserve it and care for it well and make it accessible to other researchers, as well as putting it online.
so repository, you're talking about some of the fossils that we have in our collections that are kind of behind the scenes. Mitch talked about our Dinosaur Hall and the specimens that are on display there. My niece was here. I think she was in 4th grade at the time. She was here on a field trip, and I caught up with them, and this kid in her group was like, "Do you guys have any T-Rex?" We said, "We have a T-Rex skull over here." And he goes, "That's it? You don't have the rest of it?" I said, "No, but Spletosaurus, one of its relatives." And he goes, "Oh." So, to that kid's point, when kids think of dinosaurs, they're thinking T-Rex, Triceratops, things like that. Why do we have the specimens on display that we have on display? Is it, this is what we have, so this is what's out, or were we very intentional and selective about what's out there?
It's both things. It's both things. So I mentioned we started a program going out in the field looking for dinosaurs. We had the assistance of the Bureau of Land Management with some of that. They're responsible for the care of much of the federal public land in this country, making sure that it's conserved and protected and that its resources, whether they be cultural or fossil or minerals, are, again, protected and used wisely. So I contacted BLM office in Wyoming, and they had a couple of sites that were in danger of potential vandalism or just erosion from the elements, and said, "Yeah, why don't you come out and collect these?" So got a permit, went out and did that. And from there, we developed a field program every summer where we would invite members of the public coming out to join this citizen science project and learn how to excavate the fossils with us. But more than that, learn why we were doing that, what this means, what kind of clues are we looking for, what's the evidence we're collecting, the associated contextual data, all that stuff. Not to mention ecology and regional history. It was a blast. People loved it. As a result of that project, we ended up with a huge collection of late Jurassic sauropod remains, particularly young ones from a site called the Mother's Day site. That elevation science is still working. As we're out there working that site, other opportunities made themselves known to us for a variety of ways, one of which was the Galeomopus, big sauropod, 50-foot long dinosaur we have prominently in the center of the Dinosaur Hall.
Greet you face to face right when you walk in.
Yeah. So most of our early work was in the Morrison Formation, these late Jurassic rocks. So that's what we had, right? So we're going to put some of those up. And it wasn't always clear we were going to have a Dinosaur Hall. When I was first going out there, I don't think there was any intention from anybody else in the museum to make sure dinosaurs were exhibited here. But part of my evil plan to turn this museum into a paleontology empire was laying this Galeomopus skeleton out in the collection building in paleontology room over at the Geyer Center, knowing full well that when senior leadership and board members and things come through, they'll see this thing, say, "Why isn't this exhibited?" And then they'll think it was their idea, right? So anyway, so we did that. And we started knew that we had some of these great dinosaurs. And we realized we could tell a fantastic story about the late Jurassic environment based upon what we have, but also acquiring a couple of other things. I mentioned partnerships with Marietta College. We've got material from them. We traded for our Allosaurus specimen with Earlham College. And maybe the pride and joy of the Dinosaur Hall is the Torvosaurus, which is the only associated skeleton of that dinosaur in the world. It's very rare, apex Jurassic predator, fantastic skeleton. And we got that in large part because it was an important research specimen.
Because, as you mentioned, it's the only articulated specimen of its kind in the world.
Right. So we could have gone out and got a Tyrannosaurus, right? I'm sure we could have done that. Actually, they're not that uncommon. Some dinosaurs are very rare.
Do you think T-Rexes are overrated? Do you think they get too much publicity?
Maybe. I mean, it's a cool dinosaur, no doubt about it. But, there's so many other cool things out there. So let's learn about some of those. Torvosaurus and Tyrannosaurus are very different. They're big, giant, meat-eating dinosaurs, but there are a lot of anatomical differences between them. So it's really cool to compare them.
If you look at them, it kind of, Torvosaurus does kind of look like a T-Rex. To the naked eye, you see it, on two legs. It's got kind of the short arms, but it's got longer arms than a T-Rex and kind of longer fingers or, claws.
Yeah.
It looks like a sleeker, like more athletic T-Rex, no?
Yeah, superficially, one might say it looks like that. But if you actually get into the details, they're very, very different. They're separated by, 80 million, 75 million years, something like that in time. So these dinosaurs do not coexist. They're nowhere near each other in time. And they're not that closely related, other than being theropods, these meat-eating bipedal dinosaurs. So things like the proportion of the legs and the details of the pelvis, particularly the pubic bone, the arms you already mentioned, there are different numbers of fingers, the configuration of the skull is quite different. Anyway, it's different, and it's much rarer. So that's really kind of a coup for our museum to have this unique dinosaur. Another one that is great is a Cretaceous dinosaur. We have a little bit of Cretaceous. Mostly the Dinosaur Hall talks about the late Jurassic environment, the animals that were there, the dinosaurs, and the other things associated with them, turtles and crocodiles and fish and plants, what that environment was like, what are the clues that paleontologists look for to interpret environments. But there's a section of the hall that's also reserved for that dinosaur bird transitional story that is so well known now and is one of the best pieces of evidence in the fossil record for evolutionary transitions. It's just amazing. So we have a part of the hall that talks about that, and that's where we could have gotten a Tyrannosaurus, an advanced theropod, but there was a more exciting one, I felt, the Daspletosaurus, because have you heard of Daspletosaurus before you came?
I had not, no.
Most people have not. It's, again, very rare. So there are dozens of Tyrannosaurus around the world. And you can go most of the major cities around the world and see either an original skeleton or a cast of a Tyrannosaurus. Daspletosaurus is much less common. And it's just as imposing, I feel. A little bit smaller, 10 million years older, something like that. But it's a close cousin, and it's part of the Tyrannosaur family. It is a tyrannosaurid like Tyrannosaurus. So we did intentionally choose some things for their impact in the museum, but also in the research world.
Yeah, the Dino Hall is kind of a tour through the scientific process or through scientific research. How unique the specimens are, what they contribute to research in those areas. And to take that even further, there's also a section that has, a field jacket that's cut open that shows how these fossils return and some of the tools that are used to get them out of the ground, but also then get them out of their field jacket. So it does I think Dinosaur Hall does a really great job of showing that kind of full process of paleontology.
Yeah, it goes further than that, Cody. And, so a lot of those tools, people have been using the same kinds of tools, brushes and picks and hammers for 100 years. And that plaster of Paris and burlap technique is 100 years old or so, more. We still do that sort of same thing. But now what we do, coming back in the lab, we can bring up kinds of modern technological innovations to bear on research. So the Dinosaur Hall shows a 3D model of our Apatosaurus skull that was done through CAT scanning. And you can manipulate that and examine it, and you can dissolve away the bone, again, air quotes, to see what the shape of the brain case was and where the cranial nerves and the semicircular canals are positioned within the skull. We also have a fantastic interactive that tells that non-avian dinosaur to bird transition that shows evolutionary relationships as we currently understand them, and it's with computer algorithms that those kinds of trees, those kind of phylogenies, evolutionary trees are generated by comparing what are called synapomorphies, shared derived characteristics, anyway, to create these clades or nests of relationships. So there's some of the modern stuff that we do is highlighted in the Dinosaur Hall as well. I think that's kind of cool.
I think people kind of take dinosaurs for granted. When they see it in a museum, they kind of take it for granted, and it's just there. So the process behind it and how active they still are. I mean, when you look at a specimen in a museum, it's still active. Someone is still doing research on that. They're still trying to understand it. And including me right now, because you're talking about dinosaurs to birds, that transition. Everyone always says, oh, it tastes like chicken. Do chickens taste like dinosaurs, or do dinosaurs taste like chicken? What do you think?
Kind of the same thing, really. In fact, there's been a study done on that, sort of tongue-in-cheek, for Thanksgiving one year, I believe, where somebody did cladogram, or
How close your
evolutionary
turkey is?
tree. Yeah. So right. So your turkey and your chicken are is a crown group, like right at the top of the tree, and then you've got your theropod non-avian dinosaurs branching off from that, and down at the bottom you get towards things like crocodilians and lizards and snakes, and so.
For any parent of a picky eater who's listening right now, whose kid is complaining because they'll only eat dino nuggets, all chicken nuggets are dino nuggets.
That's right. That's right.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur? Present day?
Well, I already mentioned the cardinal. I use that just for illustrative purposes about evolution. And as far as extinct dinosaurs, I get that question all the time, and it always changes. I don't know. It depends what we're doing at the time. So we've got a research project on Daspletosaurus, which we mentioned, this big tyrannosaur that we've just completed, should be available for publication soon. So that has kind of been my favorite, for the last number of months. Prior to that, it's whatever else we were working on. When we were putting the Dinosaur Hall together, it's whichever dinosaur we're doing. So Gallimiopus was a great one. Was my favorite one time when we had it at the brewery, right?
Yes. So Gallimiopus was displayed for the first time in Rhinegeist Brewery. To our knowledge, probably the first time a dinosaur has been displayed in a brewery, right?
Almost certainly. And I think they applied and perhaps were accepted the Guinness Book of Records for the largest dinosaur in a brewery.
That's amazing.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I know they applied for it. But I don't think anybody's ever attempted anything like that, and it was a huge success both for Rhinegeist and the museum. I think it was.
You spent 4 years excavating.
6 years.
6 years getting that thing out of the ground.
Yeah, 6 summers. Of course, we're only out there for the summers.
And then how long to get it out of the rock? Then
7 years in the lab.
Yeah.
To get it out of the rock.
So we're up to 13.
And then another 5 years planning and developing the exhibit and raising the money and creating the armature and getting the thing installed. So it was an 18-year project.
Living with something that long, did you ever get sick of it? Are you ever like, I'm so tired of seeing Gallimiopus? Can we work on something else? Can we focus on something else for a little bit?
Well, I think there were times when we were digging it up in the desert where, oh my God, this is unbearable work. It's hot, it's dry, it's dusty and windy, and there are rattlesnakes. But there was always that, that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We're going to get it out. We're going to get it out. And it's going to be a fantastic skeleton, which it turned out to be. Jack Horner's name you may know. He's a famous paleontologist who was kind of the inspiration and advisor for the Jurassic World series. Anyway.
See, I had him confused with the
little
kid
Jack
who
Horner.
who sat in the corner of the pie. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Jack told me once that once you collected a sauropod, you never want to collect another. And he was right. I didn't believe him at the time, but he was right because it was a major engineering project. The last block of rock we took out was 2 tons.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was in it?
The body, the hips,
yeah.
The ribs, and the articulated vertebrae of the body. We couldn't really separate those in the field, and it was in a pretty hard sandstone siltstone, and so it had to be taken out as a giant block. We had a tunnel underneath it and put supports up there, get plaster parasol around. That was a really great job for graduate students. Climbing underneath this 2-ton block of rock while I supervised. And then ultimately we had to borrow a front-end loader and a driver to lift it out for us.
So do you bring like an engineer with you, or you kind of just figure it out?
No, we figured it out. And one of the guys who was along on the trip, a good friend of the museum, was actually a math major in college. So we thought, well, what's the density of limestone or sandstone, blah, blah, blah. And what do we estimate the volume here? And we figured out how much it was going to weigh, we thought.
Wow.
When we put it on a trailer, we went to one of these truck scales, and we hit it on the nose.
Did
pretty
you?
much, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in college and grad school, geology is as much a part of this as paleontology and almost zoology, biology, right? As a paleontologist, you're kind of a triple major in that way, right?
Triple threat.
Yeah.
I think
threat. I mean, if you went into baseball, you couldn't hope to be a triple threat. You were exactly where you need to be.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thanks.
I've not seen you throw or hit.
I loved baseball as a kid. Anyway, so I think that's true for most paleontologists. Not all paleontologists. Some have more of a geologic bent, because they're interested in, again, those ancient environments. Some may have a strictly biological bent and may never get into the field. I remember a famous paleontologist being described as someone who thought fossils were dirty, and but great theological insights, from this fellow. So some people look strictly at anatomical stuff, but I would say the majority of paleontologists have pretty good knowledge of both fields.
Some are rock stars, some are boneheads, some are both, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard it put that way before.
So Elizabeth Pierce, our CEO, was addressing a group of paleontologists, and I said, do you want me to write your remarks? Because your intro is going to be, good afternoon, boneheads. And she goes, do not write that.
Yeah.
How would that have gone over?
I'd have probably gone over fine. Okay. It's not the language I would have chosen either. I'm glad she nipped that in the bud. But, most of us are pretty happy-go-lucky.
You mentioned Jurassic Park, and it was going to come up anyway. So that came out in 1993. Was that kind of like the Top Gun for paleontology?
Yeah. We didn't go out and join the Air Force or Navy, whatever it was. But there is such a thing called the Jurassic generation.
Yeah.
Now, I'm too old to be part of that generation because I went to the premiere of Jurassic Park in Leicester Square as a invited paleontologist.
What did you think?
It was fantastic at the time. I mean, there were obvious things that were problematic from a scientific point of view.
Are you able to just suspend disbelief and just...
Yeah, I guess, you do that with all movies, don't you? Yeah. Most of them. What was really memorable at the time were the mechanical and CGI dinosaurs. They looked so lifelike. People were just amazed. Even those of us who study the things. So it was a pretty cool experience. But yeah, there's a Jurassic generation, kids who saw that movie and said, I'm going to be a paleontologist, as we were talking about earlier, and grew up to be dinosaur paleontologists. There are a lot of them out there now. There's a fellow who's a pretty big name in Scotland, the University of Edinburgh. I have a letter from him in my office that he wrote me when he was 14 saying, I'm going to be a paleontologist. And, can you give me any advice? It must have been good advice.
Because he is, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite representation of dinosaurs in popular media, whether that's in film or elsewise?
Yeah, from accuracy, I would think Jurassic Park series, particularly. I mean, the first one is so memorable because that's the one that came out first, that sort of shocked us about what filmmakers could do with the magic of Hollywood. Now, granted, they should have had feathers on a lot of those things, the velociraptors and such. We know that now. But so that was great. As far as entertainment value, you're right. I love King Kong and those old things. The Valley of the Gwangi is one of those great old movies where cowboys fight dinosaurs.
Is that a Harryhausen?
I think it is Ray Harryhausen. I think so. Yeah. So those old ones are really cool. The stop motion claymation things, great.
So thinking of King Kong fighting dinosaurs, there's there's some storyline there about how those coexist. But the people who first started finding fossils, finding dinosaur bones, what did they think? Did they think that, oh my gosh, there's a massive animal in these woods somewhere?
Well, I don't think we know what the very first people who found these thought. One of the earliest depictions of a dinosaur bone in, I'll call it the literature, although it wasn't scientific literature that we would consider today, was of the end of a thigh bone or femur of a big theropod, probably Megalosaurus. And I think it was originally suggested that this was maybe part of the thigh bone of one of Hannibal's elephants or something like this.
Interesting.
It wasn't really considered an extinct animal initially. Later on, people did come to recognize, we're finding stuff that are not around anymore. And by that time, the concept of extinction has sort of come along. Big Bone Lick played an important role in that, showing that there were, in that case, mastodons, not dinosaurs, Ice Age mammals, but mastodons couldn't be found anywhere today, so things go extinct. And this is before really evolutionary theory comes along, which didn't begin with Darwin, by the way. There were people toying with this idea, talking about change through time and mutation of species long before Darwin. Darwin just came up with a acceptable mechanism that made real sense. How could this possibly happen? We see it in the record. We see their differences. We know through time things have changed. How did they do it? That's Darwin's great contribution. So people have thought, their ideas have changed over time about what these fossils represented.
Darwin studied dinosaurs as well, right?
Was
it finches?
Finches.
Yes.
Well, yes, you're right. Got me there. He did study finches and other things like that. Yeah, and he collected fossils, not dinosaurs, but on his travels with the Beagle, brought fossils back from South America that you can find at Cambridge today.
Often you hear of dinosaur fossils being found in these desert areas. First question: why? Why are those areas so prone to those discoveries? And two, do you find fossils in more, do you find them in rainforests? Do you find them in different climate areas? Because you don't hear of someone finding, this great fossil discovery in a, lush forest necessarily.
Yeah. So a couple things there. First, if you're looking for dinosaurs, you have to go where they're found, of course, and you're going to have to find them in rocks of the right age to contain dinosaur fossils. All right, so rocks around here in Cincinnati, far too old to contain dinosaurs. Dinosaurs didn't have even a thought of evolving, for several hundred million years. So we don't have dinosaurs in Cincinnati, imagine that, because the rocks are the wrong age. They're also of the wrong environmental type. They're marine rocks, shallow tropical sea marine rocks in the Cincinnati region. And dinosaurs were not walking around the bottom of the ocean, and they... in the Ordovician, certainly were being washed out to sea. So you got to go to rocks of the right age and the right environmental type. So an area of active deposition during the age of dinosaurs, say a floodplain or a river system, that kind of stuff, where fossils, terrestrial fossils, animal living on land, are likely to be buried and then preserved through time. So that's one thing. Then you have to go to an area that is currently an area of active erosion, where those rocks are brought to the surface by mountain building, plate tectonics, uplift, that sort of stuff. So the Rocky Mountains, for instance, is a great place to do that. The core of the mountains are very old, but around the fringes of the mountains, you have these various ages of rocks being brought up and upended. So you can find rocks that are exposed in places like that. And deserts are great because there are no buildings or trees covering them. So the first dinosaurs in this country, or at least the first good skeleton ever found, is found in New Jersey.
Really?
Yeah. And there's still dinosaurs out there. In fact, they're still finding dinosaur bones. There's an active program at one of these old marl pits now looking for dinosaur material and finding out there. But, it's harder to find things, as you say, in a rainforest or a deciduous forest or, swampland. You want to go where these rocks are exposed. So the central continental areas of places like North America and Asia and Africa are good for that.
And to to the rainforest or the forest situation, you also have to be able to access it with the right tools and equipment as well, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to lead this expedition deep into the forest and then get those things back out very easily, right?
Well, not easily, certainly. It's still done. And back in the day, when you could hire a vast workforce for $10 a day or something, you could do that. Have this huge caravan off into the forest. And even today, it's a lot easier to drive closer to places and with off-road vehicles, sometimes right up to places. But it usually still requires a lot of legwork, walking around, prospecting, looking for things. And sometimes the situations where you find something can be very difficult. They can be on the side of a cliff. We've had to excavate things up places like that. They can be way up in mountains. We collected material in Nevada where we had to hire pack horses to get material out, ride the horses in, and lead them out with all the fossils.
How are you as a horseman?
Oh, I'm pretty damn good.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
I've done a lot of riding in my day. Yeah.
Things I never thought I'd learn. That's awesome. This is also fun because I get to sit and grill a paleontologist for almost an hour and ask him all of my childhood questions, and not just if dinosaurs taste like chicken. So talking about where fossils are found, this is going to sound like an unintelligent question, but you said Cincinnati's rocks are too old and they're kind of upended. Is there potential that there are dinosaur fossils underneath? I mean, everything's kind of topsy-turvy. Is it
It's not
deeper
topsy-turvy
underneath,
around
or-
here. It's sort of like a layer cake, right? So the oldest is going to be at the bottom. So you can't go older and
It's not
expect
like
to
it
find it.
churned. It's
Not here.
pushed up and kind of been eroded down.
Yeah, and if it's very likely there were dinosaurs around here at one time, excluding avian dinosaurs, our friends the birds, but those rocks are not preserved. So they're either not an area of active deposition, as I mentioned, when the dinosaurs were around in this area, so they're not preserved, or if there were any rocks preserved, they've long since eroded away. I think the former is probably more likely.
How about fossils on the seafloor? Do we think there are fossils on the seafloor? And you talk about plate tectonics and that you know everyone talks about the Ring of Fire around the Pacific. Are there fossils at the bottom of the ocean?
So the modern seafloor, yes and no. There are fossils of things that are more recent in time. So if we talk about the age of dinosaurs, and we got the asteroid hitting, presumably, and killing off most of them at the end of the Cretaceous, say 67 million years ago.
Is that what you think happened?
I think so. If not, it's the straw that broke their back.
Is there
the dinosaur's
consensus
back.
on that?
No, there's still some people that want to argue other causes, but I think that's the most likely. It certainly would have been a major biotic impact. We know there was an extraterrestrial impact at that time, coincident with the extinction of most of the groups. There's fantastic geophysical evidence for that, geochemical evidence. Did it actually cause that extinction? You know, you might have to jump to a conclusion to say that, but I think that's likely because it certainly would have impacted the biosphere in a major, significant way at that time.
I'm sidetracking us from our initial, but I do hold on. I want to follow up real quick because Martha and the last passenger pigeon. Everyone thinks habitat destruction and overhunting, but when you look at the DNA of contributing factors, that the gene pool was shrinking anyway, and those habitat destruction, overhunting were the straws that broke the camel's back. So similar with the asteroid.
People have suggested that dinosaur diversity was in decline, that they were maybe on their way out already. Certainly, it's the nature of all species to go extinct. Nothing lasts forever.
It's not the only or the first extinction.
No,
right?
certainly not. And we're in the middle of a big one now, and don't get me depressed. We won't go there. Talk about that. But anyway, so yeah, I think the asteroid's really the main causal factor, but there could have been contributing factors. Anyway, so going back that old, you don't find rocks of that age on the seafloor today because of active subduction zones. You mentioned plate tectonics, so the plates are moving around. The mid-oceanic ridges and the Ring of Fire, things like that, pushing molten rock magma up from the interior of the Earth, spreading these plates out. And then there are subduction zones where these plates are sinking underneath other plates, and they're melting again and carrying whatever sediments and fossils they may have had at one time down with them. Now, there will be fossils of more recent things in portions of the ocean that haven't been subducted, but there are no oceanic plates that are old enough to contain dinosaurs.
Is the ocean kind of like when you see a cement truck and it's you got the drum rolling, it's constantly kind of mixing so it doesn't harden, solidify to that level? Is that kind of what's happening in large sections
you think
of
of
the
it
seafloor?
As a conveyor belt. The Earth is recycling itself, So it comes up as molten rock, it solidifies, it forms either the seafloor or the continental crust, and at some point in the future, dives back down again, melted, and then it pops up as volcanoes and these island arcs, and, the Ring of Fire.
The Earth is recycling itself is the scariest thing I've heard today. That's
yeah. So this mass extinction that is human mediated that we're undergoing right now is going to be a real bad thing, I think. And who knows who's going to get through it? But the Earth will be fine. There may be no life on it, but the Earth will just keep going. I'm sure there will be life, but there might not be human civilization.
At what point, at what time period do paleontologists hand it off to more recent scientists, to scientists who study more recent events?
It's sort of arbitrary. Fossils are things, just again, arbitrarily 10,000 years old or older. You have some areas where there's overlap, right? So paleoanthropologists kind of look at things from maybe 2 million years ago, 4 million years ago, up to the present. And, some of those things might It still will be modern humans, but civilizations, things will be changing. For a paleontologist, typically a 10,000-year-old cutoff, and you get zoologists and stuff looking at stuff more recently than that.
When I was in grad school for history, there would always be students who joked that, oh, you study the 40s, you study the 50s, it's not history, that's current events. It became this spectrum of what kind of constituted history among certain individuals, but it doesn't sound like scientists and paleontologists are that catty.
I suppose not.
None that you want
most
to name,
of them,
right?
none that I want to name. Yeah.
So we're getting close to wrapping up. So 2 important questions I need to ask, and I need to ask Mitch one too. Well, Mitch, we'll get yours out of the way first, and we'll let Glenn react to it. What's your current favorite dinosaur, and what was your favorite dinosaur growing up?
Growing up, it probably would have been T-Rex. It's the classic for kids. But currently, I'm going to go with the Torvosaurus. And I can go down and see it anytime I want. So
That's cool. Now, to me, T-Rex is a 70s glam rock group. Mark Bolan and all that. That's T-Rex to me. But I know the current generation, it's T-Rex is the de rigueur name. To me, it's Tyrannosaurus Rex. We don't call Stegosaurus stenops, for instance. But anyway,
Is it just the Rex name that
I guess
that does that?
Yeah, it's kind of cool, isn't it? I mean, people like that. It's short and sweet.
Is T-Rex a gateway drug to paleontology?
Might be.
Okay.
Might be, but paleontology is a gateway drug to science, so I think it's fantastic.
That's even better.
Yeah, people come to the museum, and I don't expect them necessarily to grow up to be paleontologists, but I hope that everybody will have an appreciation for the dynamic, changing nature of the Earth and life on Earth. Paleontology is kind of an inroad to that, and if people get excited about STEM fields as a result, so much the better. And I think even if you don't become a scientist, everybody has to, I really think, to be an educated citizen in the modern world, have to know something about science to make informed decisions when it comes to, the world around you.
That's the soundbite for science right there. We need to put that on a poster.
I'll wear it as a button if you make some.
If we can make a button big enough.
Big button, yeah.
But we'll find the bullet points out of that. You talked about baseball and loving baseball, and now today, baseball players all have a walk-up song. What would your walk-up song be?
Gosh, I should probably, since I mentioned Mark Bolan, I should probably say Bang a Gong, T-Rex. But really, the Rolling Stones have always been my group. And I can't take Joey Votto's former Paint It Black, although I love that. So maybe Satisfaction.
Okay.
Like that.
That's great. I do have this vision that when we have these big staff breakfasts, I'm going to have a list, and as people walk in, just hit it real quick and give people their walk up song and see if anyone notices. Final question. If you could trade roles with anyone in the museum for a day, who would that be and why?
Cody, I already have the coolest job. Why would I want to trade with anybody? Maybe
Full circle.
Full circle. All right. Well, I could trade with you, right? You got a pretty laid back, easy job here. That sounds like it'd be great.
You don't want Mitch's job, but yeah, you could do mine. That's not bad. I don't think you'd want me to do yours. But okay.
I don't want to be one of the accountants. I know that because I always get my hand slapped when I forget to code something properly.
You don't want me to do your job, but you could just say yes or no. Have you ever dropped and broken a fossil?
Oh, yeah. Sure. I imagine every paleontologist has. When you handle so many of them, accidents happen.
Is it scary the first time?
Oh, yes. Okay. And I can remember, I won't name specifics or individuals or places, but I can remember breaking something. Actually, it was a type specimen in front of a pretty famous paleontologist and turning red on that. Another time I broke a pretty important fossil, and I went to the curator to apologize, not at our museum. And he said to me something I'll always remember. That's what glue is for. So we break things, but we put them back together. Yeah.
That's a good metaphor for life. So Dr. Glenn Storrs is not only a spokesman for science, but also for life. So we got life lessons today.
sure did.
Glenn, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening to Meanwhile at the Museum. Remember, if you liked what you heard, please rate and subscribe, but more importantly, come see for yourself. Visit cincymuseum.org to see the latest reasons to visit, and if you have any questions, comments, or just want to tell us how much you love the show, or tell us your favorite dinosaur, send us an email at meanwhile@cincymuseum.org. Thanks for listening.